For those who already listen to or watch the podcast, most of what you're going to see in this video is pretty redundant. But for those who only watch the videos, you're in luck. Talking through it on the pod let me change my mind a little bit. So here is the definite, at least until I change my mind again, grades for all the first team players who've appeared. That includes the Barca Athletic players like Achadi Riyad or like Marc Casado. So yeah, it's all the players that have featured for the first team this season, with the exception of those who have already gone, meaning Nico Gonzalez in the preseason, Ez Abde, or Aubameyang. We begin this list with Robert Lewandowski, who I'm giving an 8 out of 10 to. Maybe he deserves an 8.5, but I am harshly judging him for his misses against Bayern Munich this year. He's second on the team with 1,505 minutes in his 19 appearances. He has scored 18 goals, 4 assists, 0 for 1 from that PK, you know which one it was. The 2 yellow cards, the 1 red, again I don't need to remind you of that one. A 1.08 goal per 90, 14.1 expected goals, which is absurdly high considering the next highest on the team is Ansu with 5.7. He is the most outfield minutes of any player, ter Stegen the only one with more, and it was surprising to note there are only 8 players on Barca this year, who we will reveal as we go along, have more than 1,000 minutes. And again, Lewandowski tops the bunch, as is expected. I did have Lewandowski in the preseason as who I thought was going to be Barca's MVP at the end of the season. And right now, I think it's a 3-horse race. I think it'll keep being a 3-horse race. But Lewandowski with his 18 goals, many of which have helped them top the Liga table and helped Barcelona lead La Liga, well, I do think he has a very firm argument at the moment to be Barca's MVP at this point in the season. Up next is Dembélé, who I went from 7, and I'm going to upgrade that to a 7.5. After doing some soul searching, yes, there are moments when he has not shown up this season. But when I was doing that calculation of saying, oh, is it a 7 of 10? Is it a 6.5 out of 10? Well, I think 75% of the time, or 7.5 out of 10, Dembélé has shown up this season, and he has been an important figure for Xavi Hernandez. He's 4th on the team in minutes with 1,279 total, 20 appearances where he has 5 goals, 7 assists, 4 yellow cards, and 0.84 goal plus assists per 90. And just comparing that to last season, he has blown it out of the water. So looking into this season, with the contract situation, with all of his injuries, and even the hot and cold nature he's had last year, he's still going to be hot and cold. He's always going to be hot and cold, yes. But when he has been hot this year, again, another big reason why Barcelona are leading La Liga. And I would also argue that in the Champions League, a bit too much has been put on his shoulders. We do now expect him to win matches, which, to tell you what kind of expectations we have for him, means that I do have to grade him on that kind of curve and say he has largely done what Kool-Aids have asked him to do this season, but he continues to frustrate in the moments he doesn't. Rafinha is up next, and I'm giving him a 6 because while he's had a hard time acclimating to Barcelona, there are moments when you could have got more out of him. I think that number could be lower, but I do kind of blame Xavi for putting him on the left so many times in the start of the season. He has 18 appearances so far, 10 starts, 2 goals, again, just 2 goals, 4 assists, 1 yellow, and an 0.21 goals per 90. But comparing that to last season at Leeds, he had 11 goals total, 4 from the PK spot, 3 assists, and an 0.34 goals per 90. So I don't really know how many goals we expect him to wind up with. I think I expected it to not only match the 11 from last year or the 7 outfield goals that he had last year, but I did expect him to improve upon that because obviously he's not expected to be the guy as he was for Leeds. And in theory, he has a lot more help and a lot more players feeding him the ball to try to finish things off. Where I do see Rafinha thriving and raising that number isn't even with goals in the second half of the season. It's actually with an assist. I think that with 4 to start this season and him not playing well, he could end with 11, 12, 13. Again, if Rafinha does that, Dembélé continues to basically double his production, and Lewandowski basically doubles his goal production. Barcelona likely have put themselves in the driver's seat to win the Liga. Ferran Torres, another 6 from me, dog. 8 appearances, 7 starts, 5 goals, 1 assist, 4 yellows. 3rd on the team with a 4.7 expected goals, which does tell you that, yes, he misses them, as he did last season. But he is actually hitting the goal much more than he did last year. Comparatively, he had 4 goals, 4 assists, and an 0.25 goal per 90. With a 7.2 expected goal last season. So again, that number has dipped from 7.2 to 4.7. He also had a much more pronounced role for Xavi last season. And it was surprising to note too, but his 0.59 goals per 90 is actually 3rd on the team behind only Lewandowski and, interestingly enough, Memphis, but that happened in just 3 appearances. So really it's arguably 2nd on the team as far as goals per 90. To tell you that Torres is kind of having some success when he's on the field, but once again, 55 million euros, that's what he's going to be judged against, and well, those numbers aren't good enough for that, so he gets a 6 from me. Ansu Fati also gets a 6. Luis Enrique, this week in camp, is pushing hard to say, hey, don't call this player a formerly injured player or keep bringing up the injuries. He's fully healthy. His camp seems to say he's also fully healthy. So actually, that's why I still have to go with a 6. 20 appearances, 5 starts, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 0.38 goals per 90, and 5.7 expected goals, second on the team. Unless he gets hurt again, I don't see a possibility for him to be, we'll say, this bad in the second half of the season. I think he's only going to improve because I think Xavi's going to, having worked him back slowly and integrated him back slowly, trying to build his confidence, as he gets faith in his body again, I think he's going to get a lot more time. He'll get a few more starts. And I think the Ansu Fati that we know, who can be as clinical as he can be, he may not reach his ceiling again, but it'll be much better than we saw in the first half. And rounding out the forwards, it's Memphis Depay with 3 appearances this year, 2 starts, 130 total minutes, 1 goal, and 0.69 goals per 90. If there is one player to leave in January, I think you have to say it's Memphis, because the fact that he is available for the World Cup, he's in Qatar with the Netherlands, it does raise red flags and questions of his ability for Barcelona. I think he's a player that realistically wants to play and should be playing. But I think that injury kind of doomed him to be what he was always probably going to be, and that's 6 on the forward depth chart. So I can definitely see Memphis pushing for a move in January, and obviously every time that Barcelona can shed salary, as they've done with Gerard Piqué, they're excited to do so. Oh, and I didn't give my number. I mean, it's got to be an incomplete. I would love to give some kind of 5 or 6 or 7. Again, he basically has a 7.5 for the 130 minutes he was on the field, but that's not a big enough sample size. But 5 is too low because I'm not going to blame him for really not being on the field, something that might be out of his control. So I just have to give an incomplete to Memphis. Now on to the midfielders. It's an 8 for Pedri, because if it's an 8 for Lewandowski, it's an 8 for Pedri, who might get punished when it comes to the end of the season and how he's viewed by those outside of Barcelona who may just be looking at the numbers, because Pedri's numbers actually aren't that great. He is 3rd on the team in minutes with 1,426, a real positive after last season that he is staying healthy. And in those 19 appearances, he has just 3 goals, no assists, which is a huge surprise for me, just an 0.19 expected assist per game, and no cards, which is also a positive. That assist number is way down. He has to at least pick up, maybe even by accident, 1 assist by being in a starting interior for FC Barcelona. So that is a really surprising figure for me. The 3 goals is good, but I do want more scoring from the midfield. And it seems like Pedri's the only one doing it, so I want that number to be even higher. I guess Frankie de Jong's doing a little bit of it, but yeah, for Pedri, I want him to have at least 4 or 5 goals in the second half if he's not picking up an assist. But again, Pedri, when you watch him, you understand just how important he is for Barcelona. I would argue that he's been the most consistent player for Barca. That's also why he gets an 8, because I can't think of a match where, other than when Barca is outmatched, Pedri has been good every single time, and he has at least a 10 to 15 minute stretch where he's the best midfielder on the field in every game that he suits up for. Which leads me to Gabi, who I started at a 6.5, but I'm going to push that up to actually giving Gabi a 7. Numerically, again, if I'm not going to count the counting figures against Pedri, I can't do it to Gabi. Gabi, with 1,132 minutes, is 8th on the team in minutes. He also has made 19 total appearances. He has just 1 assist, 4 yellow cards, which again is a bright sign that he put that down from last year. He has just an 0.3 expected goals per game, which tells me that Gabi isn't even intending to shoot. He is not being seen as a goal-scoring threat. And again, this kind of goes on Xavi. Very much like Rafinha, who was played out of position. Gabi at the left interior spot and that 1 appearance at left wing, well, that wasn't it. And so Xavi kind of messed that one up, and I can't blame Gabi for that and lowering his total rating this season. His 0.02 expected goals per 90, again, could not be lower, which kind of indicates to me that I think Xavi, not to say that Gabi is choosing not to shoot because Xavi told him to, but I feel like Xavi is telling him to do pretty much everything else but shoot. And it's to create some things. And yeah, he just has the 1 assist. But for Gabi, I do want those counting numbers to get a bit better. But again, it's the eye test. This team, their grit, I mean, to say that the heart and soul of a team is coming from still a teenager is pretty wild to say. But it seems like when Gabi is on his day and this team kind of adapts to the physicality and the fight and the desire and all those intangibles that help you win games, Gabi has all of those things in spade. And that's why he gets a 7. On the other side of the age spectrum, we're going a bit lower in the ratings. Sergio Busquets, unfortunately, gets a 5 for me. 1,195 minutes is 5th on the team, which is lower than his 1st on the team last year. 16 appearances, 1 assist, 9 yellow card, and 1 red. And it was never about the counting and never has been about the counting stats for Busquets. But numerically, as I said on the podcast, he is in the 90th percentile of aerial duels won, which is way up in his career, 76th percentile in tackles, 70th in interceptions, and still 94th percentile in passes attempted and progressive passing. which does put him, not to say in elite company, but that second level down for defensive midfielders in the world. What is crazy about Busquets, though, is his passing percentages are kind of up across the board. 82% on his long ball is his highest since 18-19. And the one offensive outlier, though, his expected assists per game are at 0.6, and they've never been lower than 1.5 since they started tracking that metric in 2017. Now, of course, his wages jumping from $423,000 a week and $22 million annually to $712,000 per week and $37 million annually. That's a huge number, and Busquets, as his wage went up, it seems like his performances are going down. And once again, with Pedri and Gavi and Busquets, it's all about that eye test. Clearly, Busquets, it's not about him defensively in transition. It's not about the things that Busquets has never done, even those aerial duels that I was talking about. It's the fact that the simple things are getting harder and harder, as it does for older players. And I'm not saying this is it for Busquets, but certainly being an out-and-out 90-minute starter, I just don't think he has that anymore. And that has been on full display in the first half of the season. That's why, based on the expectations we always have for Busquets, it's a 5. Frankie de Jong was another tough one. He gets a 7 from me because I think he's pretty much done when it came to the contract situation, the preseason, and all the mess that was surrounding that. He basically has done everything that Xavi and Barcelona fans could have asked from him. He's 7th on the team in minutes with 1,137, made 17 appearances, 2 goals, 1 assist, no cards, has played on the back line. Look at that assist to Rafinha. I think that's worth at least a 6, just that game alone. But as we keep saying, that when Barcelona are good, Frankie de Jong is good. And if Frankie de Jong struggles, then maybe Barcelona don't have a good game. And that's really indicative of how important he is and can be for Barca. Now, the benefit of doing the podcast, talking about it, and then getting some responses and doing this does help me raise the Franck Kessié grade a bit. I had him at 4.5, but I do think that is a bit too much for Franck Kessié. I should give him a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt because he really hasn't even played that many minutes. So I'm not even sure if we have enough of a sample size to judge him that harshly. 13 appearances though, 5 starts, yet less than 500 total minutes for him. 1 goal, 3 yellow cards. Whatever Xavi is seeing in training, I think that is where the rating should probably be lower, not even what he's done on the field. He has yet to carve out anything that he did well at AC Milan. Yes, he's getting into the attacking third, especially when Barcelona are trying to break down a low block. He does get forward. He has not even that physicality, but movement that seems to be really helpful, but he's not combining well with his teammates, and it seems to me like a chemistry issue, which I'm going to give him a 5.5 at this moment and kind of kick the can down the road. Again, expectation-wise, Busquets is under expectations, and Kessié, I think, is under expectations too, but again, the sample size is just too small for me to be too judgmental on Kessié, and this all, again, also after receiving the response that I did, and people were trying to be a bit more positive than me, so I am going to agree with the masses here. And Pablo Torre gets a 6. Probably close to an incomplete because he has only made 4 appearances, 109 total minutes, 1 start where he had the 1 goal in the Champions League and 1 yellow card. Haven't seen enough of him, but I also think in this case, he's learning the system, and I think he's done pretty much what Xavi's asked him to do, coming in late in games, and the one time he did get an opportunity, he did score a goal in a game that wound up being a win for Barcelona. So for Pablo Torre, that's why I'm going to land on a 6. As you've also seen here, I'm also not going to be too harsh with teenagers. I mean, what are we asking of them and who are we asking them to be? Talk to me again when he's like 21, 22. Marc Casado and Alfaro Sanz both get incompletes for me because they both made 1 appearance, 24 minutes for Casado, 14 for Sanz in that Champions League match. And so there really is not much to say of these. I do hope to see a little bit more of Casado. I have some questions about how he can raise his level for the first team. I just don't know how many opportunities he's going to get. And then all of a sudden you blink and he's on loan or he's sold in the offseason. So I'm not surprised if we do circle back to this at the end of the season and those grades are still incomplete. For the defenders, Ronald Araujo gets a 7 for me. And I guess this is the one time where I am kind of blaming him for not being on the field. When he was on the field, you could argue that he was an 8. Now, the reason I say a 7 is because we already saw before he got hurt, which was only in the 3rd week of September, that teams were kind of game planning for how little he could do on the ball. Whether he was playing center back or right back, teams were setting up in their press and in their block to make him beat them. And that is where we saw against Rayo Vallecano, Barcelona did have some issues. And you could think that with Araujo around, there might have been a few more draws as opposed to games that Barcelona just kind of had to take the lid off the can and see what happens. He's only made 7 appearances this year, 600 minutes, 2 yellow cards. Again, hasn't played since September the 17th. And the one time he did play in the Champions League, it was that 2-0 loss to Bayern Munich, which, as I said with Lewandowski, could have gone the other way. He was on the field for just 3 total goals conceded by Barca this year, 1 to Real Sociedad and 2 against Bayern, which, again, makes you say, of course, the answer, and why I still say with a 7 for Ronald Araujo. If he were healthy, Barcelona would still win the Champions League. No doubt in my mind. You can bring up all the other players you want, but it is a immediate correlation between Araujo and Barcelona's Champions League lives. Eric Garcia, just like the podcast, I'm sticking fast to that 6.5. He's been exposed in the big moments we expect him to be exposed in. When you ask Eric Garcia to be the starter in the Champions League in the most important match of the season instead of Araujo and Koundé, yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. But very much like the rest of the depth of this squad, in the Liga, Eric Garcia has been more than fine. 833 total minutes, 1 goal, 2 yellow cards, and 13 appearances, 10 starts. Eric Garcia in the build-up, especially playing against those mid-blocks and those low blocks in the Liga, Eric Garcia's passing is the best on that back line. I think Koundé does have a good argument, but a lot of responsibility is always put on his shoulders to build play and have possession and make the most of it when Barcelona are playing in the Liga and trying to break down an opponent. And I think he always does that to good effect. Again, what is he being asked to do, and what is he doing? And I think generally, he does what he's being asked to do. There was that 5 seconds against Lautaro Martinez. You can bring it up in the comments. And that's why I went with a 6.5. So it's not some awesome grade for Eric Garcia, but I'm also not going to bury him completely. Jules Koundé, it's a 7.5. Once again, what he's been asked to do, and what has he done? Jules Koundé, with Araujo out, has been Barcelona's best defender by a mile. 10 starts, 10 appearances, 818 total minutes, 3 assists, no cards. Another one of those examples where if Koundé, because of El Clasico, because of that match with Inter Milan, if Koundé had 11,000 minutes this season, Barcelona are probably still in the Champions League. And that's why it's a 7.5 for me, because again, I expect in the second half of the season, that number might even go up. Where you're saying who was good this season, it was Pedri, it's Lewandowski, and there were some moments with Koundé as he works things out with his teammates, but as far as being a defender in the modern game, his ceiling is as high as anybody's on this team to really affect these matches. And the higher Barcelona want to go, as far as the ambitions of this project, that's as high as Koundé is going to go too. Just like Busquets, another captain, Gerard Piqué, gets a 5 from me. Because, yeah, the Inter Milan stuff. He's been just fine in the Liga. And yeah, it was fun to watch him in his last match against Almeria, where he had a throwback Piqué performance. But in 6 starts, 10 appearances, 642 minutes, 2 yellow cards. The 1 red card, of course, was his last one. He wasn't even on the field for. But he gets a 5 because of Inter Milan. Basically just because of Inter Milan. He actually wasn't even that bad against Bayern Munich, but clearly, Gerard Piqué, it was time for him to go. He knew it was time for him to go, so it should almost be an incomplete. He admitted as such. Barcelona had injuries, and therefore he had to play. That's why he was already done. It's a 5. For Andres Christensen, it's a 6.5, and I also might be punishing him a little bit for not being on the field. So if I gave Araujo a 7, I got it with a 6.5 for Christensen, just because defensively, he's not as good around Araujo, but he also has done nothing wrong. A 6.5 in my rating system, as you're starting to notice, is basically the epitome of not average, but of solid. And that's why Barcelona are leading the Liga. They've had enough players who've been solid this year, and Christensen is just one of that bunch. You would like to see him more on the field. 7 starts, 8 appearances, just 534 total minutes, 1 yellow card. I expect to see a lot more of Christensen in the second half of the season. And this number might stay the same if we see some of the things that Chelsea fans told us we see with Christensen. But if he keeps being the Christensen we're asking him to be, especially in the Liga and Europa League, which you could argue is his level, well, then Christensen's going to be just fine. Rounding out those center backs, it's an incomplete from Chadi Riyad. He played just 2 minutes, but 2 very important minutes in Barcelona's last game against Osasuna to close out that break in that comeback win. So hey, it was a good debut, but still an incomplete for Riyad. We might see him a little bit in the Copa del Rey or some of the Liga matches down the stretch where Barcelona are going to be dealing with other things like Europa League potentially, but I don't know. We might have seen the only appearance for Riyad this season. For the fullbacks, we start with Alejandro Balde. I'm going with a 7.5. And there's a firm argument that he should be joining Lewandowski, Pedri, and ter Stegen with 8. So yeah, I gave you ter Stegen already. But yeah, there's an argument that he should be joining them as an 8. But I do go 7.5 just because, it was step by step. And he has gotten better and better. So if you were to ask me to judge the last month, well, that's definitely an 8, an 8.5. But taking into consideration the whole first half of the season, Alejandro Balde gets a 7.5 because with 1,139 minutes, good for 6 on the team, 16 appearances. It's crazy to think that Balde, Alonso, and Eric Garcia are top 3 in defender minutes, by the way. 3 assists for Balde, 2 yellow cards. I mean, he's played on the left, he's played on the right, he's done everything. Once again, what is Xavi asking of him? And what are we asking as culés as our expectations of Balde? And he has almost surpassed all of those. I think for Xavi and for Kool's at home in the stadium, yeah, he's been fantastic. You know where I stand on Balde, and that's kind of where everybody stands. And sometimes I almost have to push back on saying it's okay to celebrate the young player. It doesn't make you smarter than everyone else to try to zag when everybody else is saying, hey, this player is really good. You know, it doesn't make you smarter to say, oh, I don't know about this. We're not praising other players enough. No, this really young player who's very exciting has been really good this year. And we can leave it at that. Like, that's okay. Just celebrate the young player. Jordi Alba gets a 6 from me. To go back to the Rafinha, Ferran Torres, Ansu Fati thing, I mean, Jordi Alba, it's actually surprising to note that he was pushed out, but he's 4th on the team in defender minutes, 828, 12 appearances, 9 starts, 2 assists, 2 yellow cards. His final ball in the final third, I think you could argue, has been best on the team, believe it or not, when he's been on the field. His defending, yeah, I mean, somehow it might have been worse than it has in previous seasons, which I think is why I landed on the 6. Offensively, same Alba. Defensively, same Alba. So that's why it's a 6. Marcos Alonso gets a 6 for me. When it's been bad, it's been pretty bad. But when it's been good, well, it's been solid. It's been average. And I think Marcos Alonso has shown us 1 or 2 really, really bad moments. And maybe we could go lower than a 6 here. And you can actually argue that he's been worse at left back than he was at center back. I think at center back, he actually has been a bit more comfortable outside of the Champions League, just like everybody. And Alonso is one of those good examples where if you want to tell me the Champions League he's a 5, but in La Liga he probably deserves a 7.5, I think that's totally fair. And that's why I landed on the 6 for him. Last 2 defenders, Sergio Roberto, hurt again. I actually do give him a 6.5 because very much like Andres Christensen, I think he's been solid in his appearances. 2 goals, 2 assists, 2 yellow cards in just 500, well, not the yellow cards, but in just 583 minutes, 12 appearances, 6 starts. Again, Sergio Roberto is, I think, doing exactly what Xavi is asking him to do. His underlapping runs have been really important until Balde started to figure that out in the last few weeks at right back because Roberto's been out with an injury. I think Roberto was that right back that Xavi was kind of asking for, especially working with Dembele. So 6.5. For Bellerin, it hurts me to say, but I'm going to have to be really harsh on him, giving him the lowest outfield number. That's a 4.5. Unfortunately for him, in his 5 appearances, 3 starts, 323 minutes, those were in absurdly important games in the Champions League, and he did not deliver. He was not up to the task, and of course that Bayern Munich match, just Bellerin was an absolute disaster. And again, I can only judge him for what he did on the field. If he had played all the Liga matches, this number would be way higher. But he was asked to do it in the Champions League, and he wasn't up to the occasion, 4.5. Rounding things out with the keepers, Ter Stegen, I already told you, Lewandowski, Pedri, Ter Stegen, they've been Barcelona's 3 best players this year. I don't know who's been their MVP, and I think the best argument, I said Lewandowski up top, sure, in the Liga, firing them home, some big moments, but Marc-Andre Ter Stegen has had clean sheets over and over and over again. He's already beaten last season's total with 12 clean sheets. He's just been great this year. Marc-Andre Ter Stegen has. 1,710 minutes leads the team, 19 appearances. As I said with many other players, it'd be an 8.5 or even a 9 if not for the Champions League. In the Liga, he's been a 9, 9.5. There's also an argument because Barcelona are atop the Liga table that Ter Stegen has been the best player in La Liga in the entire league this season. Behind him, Iñaki Peña, he played just 1 match in the Champions League. Even though he gave up 2 goals, he also had some pretty good saves to keep Barcelona in that match enough to kind of take control. So he gets a 6 for me. And Arnaud Tenas hasn't made any appearances. Has been in a lot of pictures, having a lot of fun with the team. But still, all that joy, all those smiles, and all that spirit that Tenas certainly brings from the sideline, still that gives it incomplete because he hadn't been on the field. All right, so that's everybody. A lot of games missed due injury, a lot of young players figuring it out, some veterans finally looking like they're a bit past it, and a lot of players we expect a little more from. And yet, Barca are still leading the league table at this point in the season. The Champions League fallout is going to exist all year, but I'm pretty optimistic for the second half. But we do have to wait for that because, of course, the World Cup stuff is coming up next. I'm still going to try to filter in as much Barcelona content as I possibly can that does make sense, whether it's rumors or history, and just to keep everything engaging here. So, enjoy the games that are being played if you're watching. If you don't, enjoy your time. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca.